Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091#.
lieu. The same is true for the school district. No school site is dedicated with this plat. Instead, that dedication or that requirement is also satisfied by a fee in lieu. And as I mentioned, the private parks, that requirement is satisfied by this sort of central green private park within Settlers Crossing that constitutes a greater than 3% of the area for filings 1 through 5 of Settlers Crossing. But there are also some internal private open space areas within this plat, and I'll get into those a little bit more on the next slide. So this particular development, it is anticipating some additional private park space within the development, as well as some private amenities that include a dog run, a pool, and sort of a central green area. Those improvements are not tied to specific tracks, since there are no specific tracks within this lot. Instead, those improvements are detailed on the PUD permit, which again is not in front of you tonight, but I thought that was worth mentioning. Here on this diagram, you can see the shared private park in Settlers Crossing is down here to the southeast. And again, for the public parks requirement, this plat is, rather than dedicating a public park site, will pay a fee in lieu to satisfy that requirement. And just for reference, the nearest public park will be to the south of this area, which is in the neighborhood of Legato. In terms of specific impacts of this plat or potential impacts of this plat to the existing road network, existing roads in the Northern Range were studied, designed, and constructed to accommodate future development in the Northern Range. There are future improvements planned at East 100th and Tower. This includes a signalization of this intersection, to which there will be developer contributions. And this plat, I will mention, was reviewed by the city development engineering staff, and all concerns have been addressed at this point. So the DRT has no outstanding concerns related to the impacts of this plat on the road network. I think it's also worth noting that this plat does not propose any access directly from Tower Road. The two access points are from Argonne Street, which is on the east side of the development, a sort of interior. And the new proposed intersection is at this yellow star here at East 100th and Tower Road. In terms of specific impacts to the school district, future school locations are planned collaboratively with the 27J school district through the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. And in those documents, no school site is planned for this specific location. And that is the reason that no school site is dedicated through this plat. Instead, as I mentioned, they will pay a fee in lieu to satisfy this requirement. And for reference, students would attend the Second Creek Elementary, Stewart Middle School, and Prairie View High School. There are also some new schools that are being constructed nearby, including Legato Middle School and the new South Lawn Elementary School. Based on the latest information from 27J and comments provided through our referral process, no issues have been raised regarding school capacity related to this plat. And to date, the developer has not participated in the voluntary 27J Capital Facility Fee Foundation. And this fee foundation, as I mentioned, is voluntary. It's a nonprofit aimed at addressing the district's capital construction needs. The city does not collect these fees, and it also is not required by city code. And further, the city does not withhold permits if developers do not pay into this. So now I'll get into the specific approval criteria that are contained in the LDC for subdivision plat applications. There are 9 of them, so bear with me, please. Criteria A, the subdivision is consistent with any approved rezoning, concept plan, or PUD zone document. So in this case, as I mentioned, the Settlers Crossing PUD is the relevant zoning document. Multifamily is an allowed land use for this lot. Minimum lot size, lot width, frontage, things like that are not applicable for multifamily lots according to the PUD zone document. And staff find that this application does meet this first criterion. Criteria B, subdivision is consistent with and implements the intent of the specific zoning district in which it is located. So again, in this case, it's the Settlers Crossing PUD zone document, which intends this area to develop with any or all of the following single-family attached, multifamily, or non-residential. And I will say that while the Settlers Crossing PUD allows for a mix of use, it does not require that a mix of uses be present in any one development. So further, staff do find that this criterion is also met. Criteria C, there is no evidence to suggest that the subdivision violates any state, federal, or local laws, regulations, or requirements. Staff have not found any indication of this, so we also find that the application meets this criterion. Criterion D, the general layout of lots, roads, driveways, utilities, drainage facilities, and other services within the proposed subdivision is designed in a way that minimizes the amount of land disturbance, maximizes the amount of open space in the development, preserves existing trees, vegetation, and riparian areas, and otherwise accomplishes the purposes and intent of this land development code. So staff do find that the overall layout is orderly, as the single lot lines up closely with the underlying planning area contained in the PUD zone document. Further, the access points identified along Argonne Street will create minimal disruption to regional traffic flows and provide orderly egress and ingress into this lot. So staff find that the application also meets this criterion. Criterion E, the subdivision complies with all applicable city standards and does not unnecessarily create lots or patterns of lots that make compliance with such standards difficult or infeasible. Of course, as a single lot, the subdivision plat achieves sort of a maximum flexibility to facilitate future development. Staff also find that this criterion is met. Criterion F, the subdivision either will not result in a substantial or undue adverse effect on adjacent properties, traffic conditions, parking, public improvements, either as they presently exist or as they may in the future exist, as a result of the implementation of provisions and policies of the comp plan, this LDC, or any other plan, program, or ordinance adopted by the city, or any adverse effect has been or will be mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. So staff find that the first part of that criterion is true. The plat will not result in a substantial or undue adverse effect on adjacent properties, traffic conditions, parking, or public improvements. And this assertion is supported by numerous reviews by various agencies and departments within the DRT. And these include 27J School District, utility providers, South Adams County Fire District, Mile High Flood Control District, Tri-County Health, and numerous departments within the city. Excuse me. Criteria G, adequate and sufficient public safety, transportation, utility facilities and services, recreation facilities, parks, and schools are available to serve the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service to the existing development. Again, all referral agencies that reviewed this proposal have indicated an ability to serve this proposed lot and have not raised objections to the proposed plat. The staff also find that this criterion is met. Criteria H, a development agreement between the city and the applicant has been executed and addresses the construction of all required public improvements And I would like to note, this also has changed since the packet was originally published. At this point, the city has received a signed development agreement from the applicant. And so staff find that the application meets this criterion. And finally, as applicable, the proposed phasing plan for development of the subdivision is rational in terms of available infrastructure capacity. And staff find that this is not applicable as there is no phasing plan included with the subdivision plat. So staff find that this criterion is not applicable. Public notice, required public notice was successfully met in this case by staff. And as of today, this afternoon, staff have received no requests for additional information or objections to these application requests. So in summary here, the development review team did review this case of Villas Settlers Crossing S78921, along with its concurrent PUD permit application in a meeting on January 7th, 2021. And I will also note that because of the recent receival of the signed development agreement, the unfavorable recommendation contained in the staff report is now out of date, and staff do now recommend approval based on the receipt of the signed development agreement. And finally here, the DRT does recommend that DRT does find that this plat meets the approval criteria for a final plat as set forth in the LDC. And staff further recommend that the Planning Commission forward the final plat request to City Council with a favorable recommendation. And that is the end of my presentation. If it is okay with Planning Commission, the applicant is also here and has a much shorter presentation than I do. And so if it's okay with Planning Commission, we can go ahead with the applicant presentation before questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and we can have the applicant present and then we'll ask questions from the commission.
Okay. So with that, I would like to introduce Ty Robbins and Tyler Ellick from the applicant team.
Thank you all for the time this evening. And Harry, thank you for the presentation. Covered it very well, and I think we'll keep this very brief. So I'm representing Next Metro Communities. My name is Tyler Ellick and the Villa Settlers Crossing project. We appreciate the time for the special hearing tonight and hearing this plat and request for approval. This represents the second community we've developed within your jurisdiction, the first being a Villa Buffalo Run, which we found to be well received by the community as a way of diversifying the housing offering and further bolstering the vibrancy of the community itself. We're here really to answer any questions, given the thoroughness of Harry's presentation, but wanted to offer our presence and thank you for yours.
Sure, I'll start off with a couple questions. So obviously the PUD was mixed use, the comp plan was mixed use. I mean, what was your guys' thought process and analysis as you came with your final recommendation to be residential? Did you guys pursue heavily commercial? But walk us through your steps.
So we understood within the PUD language, the multifamily being appropriate as a fit in being adjacent to 30 acres of commercial. We saw the synergies of bringing a residential product to bolster that future commercial offering on our 13 acres. So as shoppers support shopping, we've found that our residential supports commercial quite well, and the adjacencies to both infrastructure, parks, for sale housing, and being a 10 to an acre medium density, we're able to bring a population, which will then provide a great demographic to support the adjacent commercial.
So did you look at heavily trying to make this a commercial site, or were you kind of right off the get-go to go to residential?
Chairman, just sorry, a point of order for clarification for the record. Focusing on the approval criteria in 21-3241 for plats. The development permit is actually not an issue in the public hearing. And so I just want to clarify if this testimony is to development plan, that's not relevant for the record.
Well, it's relevant because it's mixed use. So we're just trying to get the background from the applicant on his decision on the many uses of a mixed use lot.
So the lot division is that issue for the subdivision plat, but not the development itself. But that was just for clarification.
Okay, thank you. I think the second question, and I'll open up to the other commissioners, just talk a little bit about we have seen, obviously the fee in lieu of lots, for the school, fee in lieu of parks. How did that go into your overall development scheme on that?
So we saw the master plan of Settlers Crossing as an aggregation of those disparate fees, creating, that central park as a way of, we're contributing through the fee in lieu, but aggregating our efforts to a focal point within the community, which can then be greater than disparate parts. The other component is outside of the requirements within our community, we're providing residents with the opportunity for dog parks and smaller node parks and central greens outside of the requirement.
Well, talk a little bit about the school district, right? I go as voluntary, right? What went again through your process of not being part of their capital facility fee?
I think that's something that is worth further conversation with the school district itself. In the voluntary nature, understanding the use of those funds and the appropriation is something that I think we're open to exploring.
So you might still be open to potentially being part of that.
Yeah, I think it's a consideration we're certainly open to.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm a little confused. So what assurance, and there may be an agreement that is signed by your company and the city, but I'm not sure of that, to continue to develop this area, build the schools, build the parks, build the dog run. Is there an agreement to do that?
So the initial pre-application for this, for the development permit process, well, let me speak to it in two phases. The first phase is the Settlers Crossing plan unit development, which is really a master plan community where we were able to enter under an approved document from 2010 in a vision much larger than ourselves. So I think we were able to pick up the work of others and stand on the shoulders of giants, if you will, to understand the community we're integrating into as a horizontal mixed use community. The map you saw in front of yourselves. In regards to our specific parcel A that we're platting today, we have navigated the PUD development permit process, starting with a pre-application meeting March of 2019. That pre-application then resulted in 4 rounds of submission of site plans through the referral agencies that Harry mentioned, including utility companies, SAC West, Mile High Flood, et cetera. And through that feedback, have iterated and refined and engineered a plan such that upon plat approval, we'll be able to progress ultimately to build the vision as intended.
Well, I think maybe staff can answer that, Mr. I mean, when you have pay a fee in lieu of a park, right, I'm assuming that goes to a certain maybe pod, or Steve, you can
That
speak to
does.
that.
Mr. Brennan, can you pull up the map you had that showed the different filings? So first off, I just want to clarify, the applicants are only developing this one piece. They are not the master developers for all of Settlers Crossing.
Mhm.
That being said, though, Commissioner Yost, your question specifically about future school and future parks. So,
Right.
so the future location of public parks in our city and public school sites are determined partly through our comprehensive plan that is from 2010, also from the current Parks and Recreation Master Plan in our city,
Okay.
and also from the 27J Master Planning Facility as well.
Okay,
And so,
go ahead.
and so as part of that, are you working to get that up?
Yes.
Or Ms. Mason, are you able to push it up? As part of that, every developer has to either dedicate land, right?
Okay.
Or they pay a fee in lieu. And so your question was, is what guarantee do we have that you'll do one or the other?
The
So according to the
PUD.
comp plan and our master plans, this area is not set aside for a future school site or a future public park site. Therefore, they would pay the fee in lieu. And you saw the amounts that Mr. Brennan put up. What requires them to do that is this agreement that's put up, that was signed and put up on your chairs today. So this requires that the applicant pay those fees for the park and the school.
Yeah, so Mr. Yost, yeah.
What
Yeah, so-
happens with those
okay.
fees? Yeah, I think we all have the same question. Go ahead.
So what you're saying is the PUD itself dictates that this entire Settlers Crossing have a certain amount of area dedicated to parks, certain amount, or either a certain amount of area or in lieu of schools and open space.
That's correct, based on the comprehensive plan, the master plan of the city. And so that's why there's not a school in literally every subdivision of the city, right? Because there's just not a need for it. But that's why there's existing schools. And as Mr. Brennan talked about, they're building the new South Lawn Elementary School now. And then in the future, this development south of this Legato, right there on that map, where that little blue little building with an arrow on it, that'll be the future middle school site. So the development, the schools are planning, and the new high school site will be that big blue area there in Reunion. So those will be long-term, the future school sites for any residential in this area.
Understood.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, you're
And
welcome.
sometimes, yeah, I think the fees in lieu is something like you said, does help sometimes school
That's
districts give
correct.
them that flexibility, Mr. Yost, to plan, just.
And
that's not
the
just
fee in
specific
lieu
to that
amount is
one.
based on, it's not a random calculation,
Yeah.
and it's not negotiated. It's based on the school district's calculations on what residential creates for housing types. And likewise with parks, our Parks Department has a regimented formula that says, for this amount of square feet, you owe us this amount of money. So it's not everyone, no matter where you're at in the city, pays that
Is
same amount.
paying in.
Yes, sir.
I have a secondary question. So it is Tyler, it is multifamily, right?
Correct, yes.
Can you explain, like in my industry, multifamily can mean a myriad of different types of housing. So are they townhomes? Are they condominiums? Can you explain that?
So there,
Just to interrupt again, I apologize, Commissioner, just a point of order. The specifics for the development itself are actually not at issue. And the criteria for the subdivision plat. I know it's a new deal for you all, and the criteria.
I understand that, and I withdraw my question. However, I do have the comment that I would think that the community would be interested in that.
Certainly understand that. Just want to make sure for the record, we have the criteria.
I understand I understand.
yeah, and it's a single lot with multiple unit types in both the form of attached and detached forms, all within one unit, offered with the flexibility of a lease structure.
Got it.
Other questions from the commissioners? Steve?
Thank you. Hello, how are you doing tonight?
Great, yourself?
Good. I'm looking at your planning information from January 4th. And of course, this is moved till tonight. And On that documentation's final plot review process, it shows pre-application meeting, completed application submitted, community development director, staff, agency review, and possible neighborhood meeting. In this presentation, there was no indication that there was a neighborhood meeting. Could you tell me why there wasn't a neighborhood meeting, or was there one? If there was, could you elaborate on that, please?
So the prior neighborhood meeting would have been had during the PUD zone document creation and approval, which was approved well before our involvement in the project as the master plan. We did not seek any rezoning and therefore was not a requirement of the process.
And what date was that? Was that 2010?
Yes, I believe the final city council approval of the PUD zone document was March of 2010,
Okay.
well before our direct involvement in parcel A.
All right. Well, I know last month things were put on hold because of development plans. And having this information in front of us tonight, as was indicated back in January, in 2010, as far as resident, there was, no one in the vicinity to have a neighborhood meeting. It would have been with the property owner at that time, which was a little yellow house. So as far as neighborhood meeting, I would think today you would have one, especially for what you're asking. Because this is quite a bit in that area there across the street that I said in the comprehensive plan back in 2010. And this is supposed to be mixed use. And I understand things are broken up here, and I see how things are laid out with mixed use flex and mixed use in the front. So the frontage area, as you would know, based on you saying you did some studies here, we are lacking an insulary as far as supporting residents already, as far as commercial and retail. We have way too much residential. And so, for me, we look at these criterias here, and criteria G, when it talks about public safety, transportation, adequacy for schools. Right now, that school is being built over in Southline will be at its capacity 6 months after it's open. So you guys come online and having kids come in across the street, that's a dangerous intersection. So I believe, the criteria as far as being adequate to schools and insufficient public safety, this is a public safety hazard. And the way your lot is designed, this should be flipped, because as your access points for fire, you have to go up the road on both corners to get into the property. There is no access right off of 96 in the middle of your property, which would make sense. So I find this rather rushed. And we had a study session last week for planning for the future of our city. And when it comes to planning, we have to make sure that this product fits for what it's designed to. And there's already been some things that have been changed as far as in this corridor. And I can tell you, I've been living here since 2004. Right now, we have 2 families of 4 moving in here every day. So we have plenty of people patronizing the store. We have one grocery store, which is a 120,000 square foot store. So you're saying that, by what's coming in would help with that. We have a lot of convenience stores, but when it comes to grocery stores, not very much at all. That's pretty much supporting 60,000 people, this northern range. So that really concerns me as far as the public safety, adequacy of schools. And then I know you say as far as amenities go, the dog park and all that, but open space and look behind, mixed use flex, all the property here are going to be occupied. And across the street at Lugago over there, you still have to cross 96 to get to that park. And that park's not even here today. So I think you're here before your time. And so, and then for us 27J, is there someone here from 27J tonight to speak on this plot?
I don't believe there's anyone from 27J. No, we did refer this application to 27J and they did respond with no objections. They could contain the projected population.
Okay, that's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Any further questions from the commissioners? Mr. Pitloff?
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, no, we're still going through.
Oh, we're still,
not even
okay.
there.
So just to follow up on some of the comments from the other commissioner. And I know that we're just evaluating this as outside of the PUD, but I think looking at it, that the framework that you're setting up here may calls into question to what I've heard from the other commissioners. You know, is this the appropriate framework with the easements that you're setting up of what this area actually is? So I know that we're not looking at approving what the PUD would be. That the framework seems pretty constrained as to what you're proposing. And then to Steve's point about the access off of Via Road, just it seems that the framework of where this is going relative to the rest of the city, I'm not sure if that fits into the comprehensive plan or to what the vision of what this space ultimately should.
Any further questions from the applicant?
No.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open it up for comments from the public. We are going to have the opportunity to, for those that are virtual with us tonight, based on some new council recommendations. So that's great to see. But for those of the public that are present today that would like to provide comment on the case, please step to the podium. Thank you, ma'am. Please just state your name and address for the record, please.
Afternoon, I'm Michelle 17067 East 106th Avenue. I'm in Reunion. And my concern is just always this multi-use stuff. I'm kind of new to this, so excuse my ignorance as I speak. There's those oak homes that are built there on 101st and Tower. And they are just too condensed. And this gentleman over here, Steve, I totally agree with him. Children walking across Tower to go to a school, not a good idea. And if you build more of that compacted, those homes over there have one road and 6 houses, driveways going into one road. If it's gonna get more condensed like that, summer cities, it's just getting too compacted, just too much, and it's not safe. And you're going to get communities, you're going to have neighbors fighting with neighbors, and it's just not a good idea.
Okay.
So I didn't really hear what his mixed use was going to be, except mixed use, but that's my concern. I don't want to see that compacted cul-de-sac with 6 houses on one road, everybody into their driveway. That's my only concern.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else from the public? We will now close the public hearing and move to our virtual. Looks like you did have to advance registration or to participate in the virtual side. I think the only one that I see is registered is Mr. Kamick. Is that correct, Tricia? Mr. Kamick, can you please?
No questions. Thank you.
Is there anyone else registered virtually?
We do have Lisa Gunmanson. I am not sure which case she has signed up for, but Lisa, you can unmute yourself.
Well, I was here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I was here to talk about the development on 120th and Chambers, because we didn't get notified about the development over there off Tower because apparently we live too far away. I definitely have some. Yes.
I think you're speaking towards our second case of the evening.
Well, I do have some concerns about this case after listening to the presentation. Can I not speak on that or no?
Of course, ma'am.
No, if it's not okay, like I totally get it and I'll just wait until the next hearing, but I'm a little bit concerned about the things going on in that part, because that's going to impact everyone in this area. You know, the kids that go to school are going to be impacted if you're going to send all of these kids to Second Creek and down, you know, off 104th, down in by Frontera. Those schools can't hold what they have now. And you're projecting that they should go, the new development children should go there, knowing that the school that's being built is already going to be filled. And not only that, but you also have one entry and exit point out of these neighborhoods. If Superior, the fire in Superior has taught us anything, it is that we need more exit points out of neighborhoods and the ability to get the fire and the police department to a fire if they need to get there. And I think the one entry and exit point is definitely not the way to go. And to speak to Steve Douglas's point, we don't have enough amenities to serve everyone in this community. So we need to start looking at what the community wants. You know, if you're on social media, which I am, every time there's a discussion about development out here, they are talking about what we need and what we want. And the city is not fulfilling the needs of what the people want. We don't need more houses. We need another grocery store. If you want to move a bunch of people in here, one grocery store in this whole area is not going to be sufficient for all this development. You know, people already complained about not being able to get their medication. The store shelves are empty. You know, traffic is already a nightmare as it is. And we're just going to keep contributing to it because no one is changing the roads or, you know, paying into new schools or paying to get commercial businesses here. We have to start thinking about the people who live here, who have made their investments, and help them be able to thrive here, because that is not happening. So I'm going to let it go. I'm going to stop talking, but I'll talk at the hearing I came here for.
Thank you, Mrs. Gudmundsson. Anyone further? Ms. Mason? We will now close the public hearing, those in person and those virtual. We'll ask for a motion for the case from the commissioners.
Yes, I'm going to enter a motion. I move the planning committee enter a finding that the requested final plot for the property located at the southeast corner of Tower Road and East 100th Avenue, contained in case S-789-21, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based on such findings, recommend that the City Council approve the final plot.
Is there a second? I do not see a second. Is there an alternative motion from the commissioners?
I have a motion. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that the requested final plot for the property located at the southeast corner of Tower Road and East 100th Avenue, contained in case S-789-21, fails to meet the following criteria of the Land Development Code. Criterion H, execution of a development plan. I further move that based upon this finding, that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council deny the final plot.
Is there a second for that motion?
Just a Point of clarification and order. H is actually the criteria for a development agreement between the city and the applicant. Is that, Commissioner, what you intended to be the criteria for the denial?
Is there an alternative motion for the case?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the planning commission enter findings that the requested plot property located at southeast corner of Tower Road and East 100th Avenue, containing in case S-78921, fails to meet the following criteria of the Land Development Code, which is E, the patterns of the lots that make any standard difficult and infeasible. And G, not adequate as far as public safety, insufficient as far as public safety and transportation, utility services, recreation facilities, parks, and schools.
Do I have a second?
I second. Thanks for that clarification. Commissioner Douglas.
Discussion from the commissioners. I'll go first. I'm not in favor of the motion. I do feel like I would have approved the case based on the discussion from the public, from the applicant. Again, I think there are concerns that I've heard from the other commissioners. However, I feel a residential for this area would be acceptable. I feel like their fees does give the flexibility. We've heard from the school board 27J that they are okay with the fee in lieu of land along with the parks. So I'm not in favor of the motion. Any other comments from the commissioners before we vote?
Yes, I too am not in favor of the motion. This seems like a very well thought out plan. And I think the PUD covers the concerns, covers my concerns of the quality of the quality, you know, the parks, the schools, the open space.
Further discussion? Ms. Mason, could we please vote? The motion has passed. 3 yeses, 2 nos. Thank you to the applicant and for staff. We'll now move to our second case of the evening. Will the city please introduce our second case?
It's also a case for public hearing, case number S-776-20-22. So Oakwood Homes is requesting the approval of the reunion filing 38 final plat for 153 single-family cluster lots and 11 tracts on approximately 21.9 acres for the property located at the southeast corner of East 112th Avenue and Chambers Road, Zone PUD, Plan Unit Development. And Jennifer Jones from city staff will be presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Before I begin my presentation, I believe the legal counsel of the applicant has something to request or has a request to make.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Berger with Spencer Fain. Our address is 1700 Lincoln Street, Suite 2000, Denver, Colorado 80203. I represent Oakwood Homes. And before we get started tonight, I'd like to request the recusal of Commissioner Douglas. Commissioner Douglas has posted on the reunion Facebook page comments that he's opposed.
I'm just going
this
to interrupt
application.
for a point of order. We've opened the public hearing and this is actually out of order. Ms. Berger is certainly welcome to speak for the applicant when it is the applicant's turn to speak. And so this is out of order for the public hearing.
My apologies. I had conferred with the city attorney and understood that this was the appropriate time. I'll make my request when we make our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam, we turn to staff to start their presentation.
Okay. One moment, we're just waiting for the presentation to magically appear.
Technology.
We forgot how to use it because we're in person tonight. Here we go. Thank you so much. The next case before you this evening is case S77620-22, located at the southeast corner of 112th Avenue and Chambers Road, and your applicant is Oakwood Homes. Staff enters into the public record the contents of the case file, the subdivision regulations, and this digital presentation. Additionally, the property is located within the city of Commerce City. All required notification and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, the Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case. Quick summary for you. Again, southeast corner of 112th Avenue and Chambers Road. The request is approval of a final subdivision plat. The zoning is PUD, the reunion PUD from the Fifth Amendment of the reunion PUD zone document. And the future land use is residential high. So the applicant's request, Oakwood Homes is seeking approval of reunion filing number 38 final plat to create 153 lots and 11 tracts on almost 22 acres. As a note, the applicant is also seeking approval of the PUD permit associated with the same property, which is case Z-781-D-482-22. That's the PUD permit, which includes things such as landscaping, addressing, civil construction documents, and those details. That is approved, reviewed and approved administratively. It's currently under review. Just as point of clarification, the request tonight is for a subdivision plat. There's no requested increase in density. There's no requested change to the zoning. The cluster lots that are the configuration of this plat are allowed by right through the reunion PUD zone document amendment number 5. We don't always bring these plats before you, right? You've seen a couple lately. Traditionally, these are reviewed and approved administratively, which is outlined in the city's land development code. The public and city council are notified as part of the administrative approval process before that approval is completed. Section 21-3241 number 4 does allow for public hearings for subdivision plats at the request of either the public entities, the community development director, or city council. For this particular proposal before you, there were public comments received, which did result in this hearing before you tonight. So the area that we're looking at, I have a few slides for you to give you some context of the area. Again, it's the southeast corner of 112th, which is at the top of this slide, and Chambers Road, which is on the left side of the slide. You can see A large area of the Reunion development shown on this slide, 104th, is down here at the bottom, and this intersection here at 104th and Chambers is right where the King Supers and a lot of commercial development is located. For context, the golf course is directly east of this site, and filing 37 is further to the east off of 112th. Zooming in just a little bit, you can get a little bit better feel of where this project is located. Again, the golf course clubhouse is directly to the east. And even closer, again, it's a vacant undeveloped site. This is actually a photo of the site looking west. And so you have 112th Avenue. Well, you can't see my pointer. Shown here on the right side, and then you would be looking directly at Chambers Road. So the future land use plan from a comprehensive plan shows this particular corner as residential high. Another point of clarification of zoning versus the comprehensive plan. So the future land use plan, which is within our comp plan, is a guiding document for future decisions such as rezonings. It is not the regulatory document. The zoning is the regulatory document. The zoning applicable to this property is the Reunion PUD zone document amendment number 5. And again, the subject or the proposed subdivision plat does not change or impact the allowed uses, nor change the zoning. It simply creates lots. Some case history. The entire Reunion area was originally called Buffalo Hills Ranch, over 3,000 acres, and it was zoned back in the year 2000. The Reunion PUD, as we know, it was rezoned in 2002. At that time, the land uses and densities and things like that that were established go all the way back to 2002. They were the same on this particular property back in that 2002 document. There was several subsequent amendments, obviously 2, 3, and 4, to different areas of Reunion. The most recent amendment was number 5. That was approved by City Council in 2019. Some of the changes that are relevant to this area from that 2019 amendment were things like lot sizes and dwelling sizes. There were no changes to the allowed uses. And then this project that's before you tonight started back in 2020. We're here in 2022 tonight with filing 38. This is the zoning that I mentioned, the Reunion PUD zone document number 5. Again, this was approved in 2019. And this is the document that sets out the allowable land uses, the densities, the development standards, all of those types of regulatory standards that we would review plats against. I have a few excerpts from it. It's quite a long document, so I won't show you all the pages. The area in question is shown here again at this corner of 112th and Chambers. 7A is how it's referred to. You'll see I've just pulled out a few of the regulatory standards that are applicable. The cluster homes, which are outlined as an allowable use. The allowable densities range from 6 to 24 dwelling units per acre. And then some of the other development standards, such as the minimum lot size, the maximum building height, et cetera, are illustrated here. This slide illustrates the variety of residential uses that are allowed on this particular parcel, ranging from single-family detached cluster homes, single-family attached, as well as multifamily. We've discussed before that the Reunion PUD does allow a variety of land uses. That MU or mixed-use designation allows for a variety, but it does not require a set combination or any type of minimum or maximum percentages. So what we're here for, the proposed plat, this is showing you the first page of filing 38, and then I'm going to highlight some of the characteristics of it for you. Again, 153 lots and 11 tracts. Access is provided from both Chambers Road via East 110th Place and from 112th Avenue via Helena Street. Tract D, which, and again, I will show you an illustration here just on the next slide. Tract D is about a 0.6 acre private park included within filing 38. There is also a trail connection that is included within the filing that connects from the golf course over to Chambers Road. In addition, Tract I, which is platted as a part of filing 38, is part of the golf course parking lot expansion that was constructed as part of the 112th Avenue improvements. And I will show you that on this next slide as well. So that parking lot is shown in blue there, Tract I on the far eastern side. You can see the access points. This is a very simplified version of the plat, by the way, but it is the easiest version to see on this type of screen. You'll see the access points to Chambers Road and to 112th Avenue with those yellow arrows, and then the internal public streets, and the green illustrates Tract D, which is the private park provided. There are other open space and tracks, but I wanted to highlight these larger ones for you. This is the track table. This illustrates the tracks that are included. There are 11 tracks on the responsible party, the sizes, again, 153 lots and 11 tracks. So we had talked about that the proposal, you could see on this illustration that these are cluster lots. And so to this slide, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of what that means. They are single family detached homes on individual lots. That blue teal color illustrates what would be lot lines. And this is just an example. But you can see that there is a shared driveway, but there are individual lots and the homes are single family detached. This is an example of what the applicant calls their 4-pack. There are some other lot configurations, but this is just an example to highlight how that does function. The homes themselves are not a part of this proposal. They're also not a part of the PUD permit. Those homes are reviewed through our master model process, which is a completely separate process from what we're hearing tonight. And part of the PUD zone document does outline the allowable height. The allowable height for this area is 35 feet, which is the same as all the other single family homes, both throughout Reunion as well as in other parts of the city. Multifamily does allow a 50-foot height, but these are 35 feet maximum. So to talk a little bit about the analysis of this plat, the plat was reviewed against the technical requirements, right, of both the PUD zone document, which I've shown, as well as the city's other subdivision standards, which are found in the Land Development Code. It was also reviewed against the policies of the comprehensive plan. And the plat was distributed and reviewed by the variety of referral agencies that review these types of proposals. A few of those are the school district, the utilities, our fire department, the water district, as well as public works and other internal city departments. So to talk about just a few of these tonight, impacts to the road network or traffic. The roads in the Northern Range were designed for the development. This development has been anticipated for many years. I had mentioned this original PUD was back from the year 2000. The intersection of 112th Avenue and Chambers Road is now signalized. There were not concerns related to these impacts brought up through the development review team. And there is a development agreement in place between Oakwood, the applicant, and the city. Impacts to the school district. You all have talked a little bit about this already tonight. Future school sites are outlined through the comprehensive plan. There's not a school site identified on this corner. And so there's not any land dedicated as a part of this. The applicant has already satisfied their land dedication requirement per 27J. And the students that would be generated from this development would attend Turnberry Elementary, Stewart Middle School, and Prairie View High School. No specific issues have been raised by 27J related to this development. To talk a little bit about private parks and amenities, I had mentioned that Tract D within Filing 38 includes a private park with park amenities, open space, shade structures, play structures, things like that. There's also that golf course connection that I mentioned. The city's golf course is directly east of this site. In terms of public parks, there was not a fee in lieu required by our Parks Department. And just to mention, there is a public park nearby at 116th and Chambers, just a few blocks to the north. As you're aware, there are many approval criteria for these plats. I will summarize as we go through. We certainly have the full extent of the text, and it is also provided in the staff report in the packet. Section 213241 outlines those approval criteria. Criterion A has to do with consistent with approved PUD zone document. The proposed plat is consistent with the reunion PUD zone document 5th amendment as discussed. Criterion B, the subdivision is consistent with and implements the intent of the zoning district. Again, that particular zoning district is part of the reunion PUD, and it is the proposal is consistent with that. Criterion C, there's no evidence to suggest the subdivision violates any laws or regulations, and there's been no indication that that would be the case. Criterion D, the general layout of lots, roads, driveways, utilities, drainage, etc. Minimizes land disturbance, maximizes open space. The layout of this particular proposal does utilize shared driveways, which reduces the amount of impervious surface and does maximize the space provided. There are access points onto both Chambers Road and East 112th Avenue. Criterion E, the subdivision complies with applicable city standards, doesn't create lots or patterns that make compliance difficult or infeasible. That is not the case with the proposal. The design it does allow compliance through the proposed development. In other words, the lots are large enough for the proposed development to meet the required setbacks and things of that nature. Criterion F, the proposal or the subdivision will not result in substantial or undue adverse impact on adjacent properties, traffic conditions, parking, public improvements, etc. Through the various reviews that were performed as part of this project review and analysis and the review of the development review team, all concerns or issues were adequately addressed. Therefore, it is not anticipated that there would be any adverse impacts. Criterion G, adequate and sufficient public safety, transportation, utilities, facilities, parks, schools, etc. Again, through that review process, all of these agencies are contacted and made a part of the process, and there have not been any objections or concerns raised about that. Criterion F, the development agreement. As mentioned, there is a development agreement between the applicant and the city related to this filing. Therefore, this criterion is also met. Criterion I, phasing as part of the construction documents. There are 2 phases identified, which 2 phases is reasonable and does make sense from a development construction perspective for this proposal. So I mentioned previously that this public hearing tonight is the result of public comment. That was a part of the posting back in December for the administrative subdivision plat. The comments that were received at that time, which resulted in this hearing, generally focused on these particular topics: density, infrastructure, grocery store, schools, and traffic. For the posting for tonight's meeting, additional public comment has been received. I believe all the commissioners have been provided those comments as they have come in over the last couple of days. And so those will be included in the record as well. So for the public comments that were received as part of the administrative posting back in December, sort of the city's review or response to those is provided here. The density question, the density is not related to the plating, so it's not something that is applicable to the approval criteria. As far as infrastructure goes, water, wastewater, stormwater, and then traffic or roadways were all reviewed by both the city's engineers as well as the responsible agencies or other utilities and providers. Grocery is also not related to the plating approval criteria. As far as schools, 27J, as mentioned previously, was a part of this review, has provided comments and has not objected to this proposal or requested any land to be dedicated. Finally, for traffic, a traffic study was provided as part of this proposal, and the required public improvements are outlined and accounted for in the development agreement between the applicant and the city. Required public notification has been met as outlined here. Approximately 63 adjacent property owners were notified. It was published and signs posted on the property. Again, comments have come in within the last couple of days, and so those have been provided to the Planning Commission for their consideration. And I believe several of those folks will also be speaking. The development review team did hear this initially back in December of 2020. Discussion resulting from that and subsequent development review team discussions and resulted in coordination with the golf course and other departments. That trail required several meetings and discussion to get those details worked out just right. All of that had been worked through, and therefore the development review team does recommend approval of the reunion filing 38 final plat. The applicant and the representatives do have a presentation. They are here to both present and then answer any questions. Planning and public works staff are also available to answer any questions. I believe the applicants will go ahead and present, and then we can do all the questions following that if that pleases the commission tonight.
Great. Yeah, let's continue with that. Welcome again.
Good evening. Just for the record, Michelle Berger, Spencer Fain, 1700 Lincoln Street, Suite 2000, Denver, Colorado 80203. I represent Oakwood Homes, and my apologies if the city attorney thought that my previous request was out of order, Robert's Rules of Order. My understanding of the city's policies regarding boards and hearings is that such a request should be made at the beginning of the hearing. But I won't bore you with Robert's Rules of Order and city council procedures in addition to the final plat criteria. It's already getting a little bit late. So I'll just, again, just briefly renew my request. We were not aware that Commissioner Douglas was going to be serving tonight. My understanding is there's two alternates and both of them had to be called for tonight's hearing. And so because we were not aware that he was going to serve, we did not have an opportunity to request recusal previously. And so due to his previous Facebook comments and his comments at the December 6th, I believe it was, City Council meeting where the City Council heard a motion to call the plat up for public hearings. We believe that he has prejudged the application, and we would request that he recuse himself from further consideration at this time.
And our city attorney, can you please, refresh our memory on our bylaws as it relates to that?
Sure, Chairman. I can cite both to the council policies, specifically Council Policy 14, to which all of you are subject to, on the conflict of interest, as well as the rules and the bylaws. Citing to F6 in the rules of procedure for the Planning Commission, it states that no member will participate in or vote on any matter in which the member has any direct or indirect financial, personal, or official interest other than the common public interest. in of such a nature that it prevents or may prevent the member from acting impartially or raises the appearance of impropriety. Any member with such an interest or conflict will disclose the interest or conflict to the commission when it becomes known or apparent and before participating in any official action or hearing by the commission. In the council policies, it states that all council members and all appointed officials shall be excused from voting on any question in which such member has a financial interest other than the common public interest, his own conduct is involved, or any other good cause is shown for his being excused from voting. The relevant commission, as applicable by majority vote of those present, shall determine when a member shall be excused from voting. Should any member being present refuse to vote on any measure or not be excused from doing so, his vote shall be recorded in the affirmative.
Thank you, Ms. Geiger. Mr. Williams, I guess maybe if you want to address the or your interest in this case.
Oh, yes, I have no financial interest. And I have no prior information. This is the first time this has been presented to me. So as far as anything that I say, I conduct myself. And when I speak, I'm not speaking as an alternate on planning, as a public citizen living in the community where I work and serve. And so I have no financial interest in this case. So I can remain based on the facts and findings I hear tonight.
Was there previous commentary on the case prior to recently on this case?
No, like I have in the past, with anything, it's a public service announcement, but nothing where I predetermine where I'm going to be. So it's like the first case. I have to take it for what's in front of me.
Okay. Do we need a motion and then to vote for that, Ms. Geiger, to either recuse Mr. Williams or not? Or
That would probably be the cleanest, chairperson.
so, Ms. Mason, maybe if we could do a vote with the commissions for those in favor of recusing Mr. Williams or not?
Mr. Douglas.
Sorry. Sorry, Steve.
Jonathan. I would like to hear Sarah's, and I may be out of line, but I would like to hear Sarah's take on this.
Well, Commissioner, I have not seen the particular communications or heard the positions of Commissioner. Sorry, yes, I have not seen what Ms. Berger is referring to or heard Commissioner Douglas's views. So I cannot specifically opine with respect to those. It is within the commission's purview to determine whether Commissioner Douglas at this point can act impartially as well as himself. He is entitled to opine on whether he can act impartially in this matter.
Is there any further commentary is there something recent you mentioned, something recently other than the council? When Mr. Douglas previously served?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There were Facebook posts, and Mr. Douglas is correct that he couched them as a public service announcement in the reunion Facebook post, which I do not have a copy with me tonight. Unfortunately, he did appear to prejudge the application based on the concerns that were elucidated by some of the commenters that resulted in this coming forth for public hearings, and then has further put forth those statements.
If the commissioners feel the need to enter into an executive session to discuss the matter, the chairman may do so.
Is there a way to look at these posts, Ms. Geiger, during an executive session?
Does well, if Ms. Berger has them available, she can present them. Otherwise, you have what's before you in terms of the material to decide the question.
Well, I'm not on Facebook, so that doesn't help.
I could
That's what I was just
potentially,
gonna say. I'm not on Facebook either, but is it something we could take a look at somehow if somebody was?
excuse me, I believe that Mr. Hayes may be able to access Facebook via his phone. I'm not sure. Facebook is a moderated Facebook page. You have to be allowed to enter the page. So excuse me 1 minute. Excuse me, I don't believe we're going to be able to provide those Facebook posts to you tonight. Again, not knowing that Mr. Douglas was going to be serving, we weren't able to bring that evidence.
Because I do feel like as commissioners, we should be actively telling, our community to, participate in our meetings. I think that if that's what Mr. Douglas did, then again, I feel like that's what we should all be doing as commissioners of the community, have that active voice. So it's different if we're posting again, we should not be saying how we feel about a case prior to, proceedings. So.
Very good. I appreciate your consideration of my request. And now we'll move forward with the fun part. It's fun for me. I'm sorry if it's not. It's fun for Jennifer too. And I just want to tell you, first of all, thank you very much for all of you coming tonight for this special hearing. And we just cannot thank Jennifer and the staff enough. This has been an extremely long haul. We jokingly say that Mr. Hayes actually was promoted from the time this plat was first submitted until now. But she's just done a fabulous job, as you can tell from her presentation. So with that said, we do have a PowerPoint, and I don't know if it's queued up or not.
Could come up any minute, Ms. Berger, and you should have a clicker up there
Okay.
to control it.
That's assuming I remember how to use it.
I can certainly do it for you as
Okay,
well.
no, I'm good. I'm good.
Last time it took 3 times, so we'll try it again.
Okay, slide number 1. So we also want to thank staff for their report recommending approval. And before we get started, I like to just give a little overview of where I'm going to go tonight, so you know where I'm going. And what I'm going to do is start by talking again about those final plat approval criteria. I'll try to make it as quickly as possible. This is probably the 4th time you've heard these 9 approval criteria. Then I'm going to just touch a little bit on the application history, some things that Jennifer didn't touch on. Then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jim Hayes, Oakwood's Vice President of Land Acquisition and Entitlements. He's going to discuss exactly how the application meets these approval criteria in more detail than Jennifer provided again. And then when Jim's done, he's going to turn it back over to me for some concluding remarks. So as you all know, there's 9 criteria for final plat approval, and the city attorney has been excellent about points of order and steering us all back to what's really important, which is those approval criteria. And I appreciate that very much. The first one is the application consistent with the approved PUD zone document? And that's going to be the Reunion PUD amendment number 5. The next one is whether it's consistent with the zone district intent. Next up is whether it complies with applicable laws and regulations and the intent of the land development code. Then we're going to look at whether it complies with the city development standards. We're going to ensure that it has no adverse effects on the surrounding properties and that it has adequate public services. There is an executed development agreement with the city. And as Jennifer mentioned, it's properly phased in 2 phases so that all of the infrastructure and services can be available for each phase as it comes online. As I mentioned, Jennifer did an excellent job with her presentation, and we've all heard a lot about plat approval. So we're going to try to keep our comments pretty high level, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have. You had some great questions for the previous applicant. I hope that we can answer your questions that you have tonight, or if you don't, that's good too. Once all your questions have been answered, again, the task before you is just to compare our application against these criteria. And then if you agree with Oakwood and staff that it meets all those criteria, we would request that you recommend approval to the city council. So I know, as Jennifer mentioned, that there were some written comments that came in that you've received, and I'm sure there's some people that are going to testify tonight. So I just want to briefly talk, oh, I'm sorry, application history. I think I missed a page in my outline. This was submitted for administrative approval, and then the staff completed the technical review. They determined the application was ready for notification actually on November 29th of last year. And then there was a public notice period that started on December 3rd. That public notice period was set to expire on December 13th. But on December 6th, City Council actually did consider this plat for a public hearing. That vote failed. After that vote, public comments were received. And on December 12th and 13th, the comments in order to qualify for a public hearing call-up are supposed to be from property owners within a 300-foot notice area. And Oakwood went through and did an analysis of all the comments that came in. There were actually only 4 comments. I think there was over 100 comments that came in, but only 4 of them were from property owners within this 300-foot notice area, the ones which are arguably the most impacted by this development. According to our analysis, none of the comments actually requested a public hearing and really didn't outline any specific violations of the land development code. Nonetheless, the community development director decided to refer the plat for the public hearing process on December 16th. So what were those area residents of the residents' area of concern? Well, the first one was the high density use. And pardon me just a moment. There's a couple things to know about this particular property that's a little bit different, and which Jennifer referenced. The PUD zone document, as Jennifer mentioned, allows this exact cluster home use as a use by right. It's considered to be a high density residential development, which is not only allowed in the PUD zone document, but it's also designated as high density residential in the comp plan's future land use map. So dating back to 2000 and even up until today in the current comp plan, this area is designated as high density residential. The next item was lack of a grocer, new commercial development. And again, Jennifer, addressed that beautifully. Again, this particular area, while it is zoned mixed use, the comp plan designated it as high density residential. And so the potential commercial use of this property for a grocer or commercial development isn't the same discussion as you potentially heard in the previous application. I thought the other applicants too, not to harken back to them, had some good discussion about how basically commercial follows rooftops. And so again, this is a high density residential. It's going to allow a new type of housing stock. I know we're using it in other places in Reunion, but other than some of the surrounding areas. The next one was views. There's actually no criterion in the land use code for views. That's likely because in Colorado, believe it or not, you don't have a right to a view. There's no common law right. And the only time that there's any sort of right to a view is if there's something called a view plane standard. So for instance, if you stand on the steps of the Capitol, there's a view plane standard. Certain buildings can't be over a certain height because they want you to be able to see Mount Evans. So throughout the area, there are view planes. There's none in this area. Schools, you know, you've heard a lot about schools, and I discussed this at some length when we were here in the fall for a different plat, just so that everybody, you know, kind of understands how schools happen. The land development code requires developers to either dedicate land or pay fees in lieu. Those are called exactions that are a requirement that state statute has allowed cities and counties and towns to require of developers so that sufficient land is set aside. Because remember, this is land development. This isn't like public school buildings or hiring of teachers. And so when people start to talk about, you know, well, there's not enough schools built and there's not enough teachers, we rely on 27J to tell us, and the city relies on 27J to tell them how much land or how much cash in lieu they need in this area. And they also tell the city and the developer what the capacity of the schools are. And they do an analysis. They have a whole plan. I know it might not be the plan that some people like. Kids might get bused, kids might have to walk and so forth, but it's the school district's plan. It's not Oakwood's plan. And so I think some of the concerns you've heard really revolve around schools that are clearly important issues, but not relevant to this plat tonight. Increased traffic. There was quite a few specific questions as to the traffic study. We did a traffic study and we can answer any specific questions that you have. And in fact, Jim will talk about that. The thing that I want to mention is that the 112th Avenue improvements, those were recently completed, and they included a traffic signal at the Chambers and 112th intersection. Those actually weren't in place at the time this process started, but because Oakwood is the master developer, and they were operating under a consolidated development agreement that addressed regional infrastructure and transportation improvements, they were able to partner with the city on various improvements to the infrastructure. So now 112th is built out, at least north of this property. And Jim will talk a little bit about Chambers Road. Chambers Road is a potential partnership between Oakwood and the city to expand it to 4 lanes, add sidewalks and so forth, amenities, but that's in the design kickoff stage. So, excuse me. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. He's far better with maps than I am. So he'll walk you through some of the details of what we're proposing tonight. And then I'll circle back and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the light too. I appreciate that. Not as young as I used to be, need glasses and light right now. So my name is Jim Hayes. I'm Vice President of Land Acquisitions and Entitlements for Oakwood Homes, 4908 Tower Road, Denver 80249. I've been working with Oakwood in Reunion for about 3.5 years. And prior to joining Oakwood, I was actually worked in public service for a bunch of local governments here in Adams County for about 20 years, including 5 years as the deputy city manager here in Commerce City. So I'm very familiar with Reunion, as well as all the long-term agreements that are in place for this master plan community. And I just want to emphasize that this is not just a subdivision. This is a neighborhood within a master plan community. As you can see from the map, it's quite large, it has long years of build out ahead of it. So in late 2017, we became the master developer, taking over the option agreement from Shea Homes, who'd been working in the community for about 17 years prior to that. There were about 1,700 acres left of land to develop in Reunion, including Village 7, which is also known as Filing 37, and this Filing 38. It was all subject to the existing PUD zone document, as well as that consolidated development agreement that Michelle mentioned.
I just want to mention, we really delivered on a lot of our commitments to the community since we took over in 2017. I just want to hit a few of those because I think they are relevant to some of the concerns that were raised by the neighborhood. Number one, enhancement and construction of regional landscaping improvements on the transportation corridors. We partnered with local nonprofit CUP to convert the Shea sales office into the Reunion Coffee House. That was actually an HBA amenity of the year in 2019. We completed the construction of the South Lawn Pool in 2020. Unfortunately, that was not able to open until 2021 due to COVID. We partnered with the city and South Adams through the Reunion Metro District for the construction of phase 1 of 112th Avenue from Chambers to Parkside, including the signal that was referenced. That was about an $11 million project. We financed $27 million privately of capital infrastructure and the STED school financing to open the first high school for Reunion, chartered by District 27J. That opened to 9th graders in the fall, and we're going to be adding classes each year subsequent to now. Implementation of a lot of regional drainage improvements, such as Ragweed Draw and Reunion Ridge. We've also worked with the city on the Second Creek Master Plan drainage, including coordinating with all the external agencies to address some of the flooding issues that would happen west of Chambers towards 112th Avenue. But overall, since we became the master developer in Reunion through the Reunion Metro District, we've actually invested $61 million in public infrastructure. And if you go back to when Shea took over, the Reunion Metro District has actually invested $125 million in public infrastructure since the inception of Reunion about 22 years ago. So since we took over in 2017 as the developer, we started working on an amendment to the PUD. And this is really intended to address the changing economic conditions that happened since the Great Recession and since Shea left the community. So during that approval, we addressed Village 7 specifically, and there were no changes proposed to filing 38. So this is actually the zoning that was in place since the original PUD, or at least prior to our amendment. During that process, we of course notified Public School District 27J, and they were made well aware of the amended PUD application, and they had quote said they support the need for various school sites within the development, and quote, representatives from 27J have been meeting with members from Oakwood Homes during the last year, meaning 2018, to discuss issues related to school siting. And the school site dedications in Reunion will be completed with future filings in Reunion Ridge, as well as the Village 10 High School, which was referenced in the prior application. So during that process, staff had found that the amended PUD application would, number one, not have any adverse effects on the existing infrastructure or taxing authorities. And number two, it included development that continues to comply with the various land use designations shown on the future land use plan, and also met goals LU1 and LU2 of the comprehensive plan. So in January of 2019, the Planning Commission actually recommended approval of that amendment unanimously. And that was subsequently approved by the City Council in March of 2019 by a vote of 8-1. So I'm going to skip to filing 38 and we'll get into some of the details of what's in front of you tonight. As I mentioned, we did submit a sketch plat in late 2020. We responded to a lot of comments throughout the fall of 20, as well as into 2021. I think one of the big issues there that I wanted to point out is that after the sketch plat was submitted, we did receive direction from the staff that a neighborhood meeting would not be required for this subdivision. I think that was largely because we had done a very large neighborhood meeting in the fall of 2018 at the Bison Ridge Rec Center to actually articulate the amendments to the PUD. I don't remember the exact count, but I was there. We had boards all over the room, probably had about 50 or 60 people that were able to attend. And I remember engaging with a lot of people about this corner specifically and what we had planned here. So I want to dive into this graphic a little bit more. A lot of the substantive comments that we received in January and May of 2021 were from Parks, Recreation, and Golf regarding the cart path and the trail connections. And I think it's pretty well graphically represented here. We actually met on site. Mr. Tinklenberg met us out there and we were out scrounging up golf balls to make sure where the errant ones might go if people were on hole 18. But in general, we agreed that the cart path alignment would go in this location.
It ultimately will require some land exchanges with the city of about 0.15 acres of city land that would go into a tract to be owned and maintained by the Reunion Metro District. And in turn, we would dedicate another 0.15 acres back to the city. That is not reflected on this drawing now. Staff had encouraged us to get through this process, and we'll follow up with an amended plat application in the future. We will also be dedicating additional land, as noted on the plat, to the Reunion Metro District for that trail connection. I think one of the other things that, I just want to mention about that 112th Avenue is really on this regional improvements map. I think it really emphasizes that we are truly looking at the entire community as a master plan and trying to address all the potential impacts from each one of these neighborhoods that we're bringing online. So 112th Avenue, again, this includes widening from Chambers to Parkside, included a multi-use trail and sidewalk. We widened the bridge and the underpass at the golf course, put in drainage improvements, including a new pond that will serve 112th as well as this filing, and improve the stormwater infrastructure through the golf course. And the city actually exercised a bid alternate in those plans to go ahead and construct the expansion of the golf course parking lot. And on that last note, it was actually 1.14 acres that we did not choose to develop, probably 10 or 12 carriage house home sites that we chose not to develop. And we coordinated with the city to make sure that the city did not have to overpay for that property. We negotiated that at our cost from Full and Wider and Shea. And that actually was transferred through a closing in August of last year. Let me jump back to this one real quick. I just want to point out that, some of the comments that Michelle had made here, we did go through the public process the administrative process with staff. They had recommended approval. It did go in front of the city council and they chose not to call it up. But we did get a lot of comments during the process at the middle of December. I'm not going to belabor a lot of those. I think Michelle did a good job of covering them, but I think it's important to show this map. When we were looking at trying to track down where all the residents' comments were coming from, it was really hard to identify. A lot of it was just emails. So we did a lot of research to determine kind of last name, parcel, generally where we thought the comments were coming from. We identified about 14 from the surrounding neighborhoods, and 95 of the comments were actually outside of the immediate area. I know we've gotten a lot since that time, but we're frankly surprised that we even got referred to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. We're happy to come and present and make our case to you tonight. We believe we meet all of the criteria, but I just think it was important to mention that. A couple of the things on the high density, as Michelle had mentioned, this really does designate this property as high density residential in the comprehensive plan. That actually has densities between 8 and 40 units per acre. So that could include potentially townhomes, apartments, senior living facilities, and our densities are much less than that, right around 7 units per acre. The existing grocery stores, we know it's very popular. It came online, I think, in 2012. That was actually built through a public-private partnership between the city, Shea, Kroger, and the Reunion Metro District through a sales and use tax incentive. Unfortunately, that incentive was allowed to expire at the end of last year, but I just want to go on record saying that Oakwood is more than willing to continue having discussions with the city about those kind of partnership agreements going forward so that we can encourage and incentivize more commercial development throughout Reunion. Lastly, I want to mention the traffic. I'll go back to this map just to show the context here. So as Michelle had mentioned, we're looking at this as a master plan community. And so the Reunion Metro District actually initiated design of Chambers Road. We had a meeting with the city on January 18th. We believe we're going to turn around the second round of construction plans here in the spring. And as you see there, the plan is to go ahead and make this a arterial road, which would actually have signals at Heartland, 106th Avenue, and we would reconstruct the intersection 105th and King Supers there to make that a much safer turning movement. This would also include a 180-foot clear span bridge over Second Creek, so as not to impact wetlands or the city's planned trail going underneath. Again, just emphasizing that we're really focused on the regional benefits here. All right, so the phasing again here, as Jennifer mentioned, we're going to go from east to west. So phase one would be in the red. As you see, we'll make sure we have 2 points of access, which is required by the fire district. And then the second phase would finish out on the west side. 153 home sites, public streets, landscaping, and park tracks. Density of 6.97 dwelling units per acre. Really about 12 acres of total development, 4 acres of right-of-way, and 4.8 acres of open space outside of the over 1 acre for the golf course parking lot. I know Jennifer showed the comprehensive plan. I just want to mention this again, that again, the southeast corner of 112th and Chambers is planned for high density residential. R3, R4, PUD, MU1 densities of 8 to 40 units per acre are allowed here. And again, we're planning our carriage and our porch light collections focused on a courtyard style with gross densities of about 7 units an acre. And again, that is more in line with medium density residential of 4 to 8 units per acre as shown in the comprehensive plan. So again, we spent a lot of time talking about the criteria. I'm not going to belabor those criteria. I think Jennifer did an outstanding job of articulating that. It's in writing in your report. But as you know, there are 9 criteria. Again, we believe that the subdivision is consistent with the PUD zone document, including all the bulk and performance standards that we've outlined. The subdivision is consistent with mixed use zoning district intent. Really, there was 1 acre or 2 acres actually shown on that PUD for mixed use separate, which was always intended to be that golf course parking lot. And then the other side of it, the 19 plus acres or so was for development. It's important to note that it does not have minimum ratios or maximum ratios of commercial or residential requirements in the PUD. And so we've chosen to go with residential for the bulk of the property. Again, the subdivision complies with all state, federal, local laws, regulations, and requirements. This is evidenced by the referral agency comments, as well as Public Works reviewing and approving our construction plans at this point. Again, the general layout of lots, roads, driveways, utilities, and drainage facilities complies with the intent of the Land Development Code. Really in several areas, we're minimizing land disturbance. It's essentially agricultural. It's not very farmable anymore. There are really no trees left on the property. We're maximizing the open space as best we can with the small park that we put in there, as well as the trail connections connecting the golf course to the Chambers Road underpass and then over to Second Creek. And again, it says talk about preserving existing trees, vegetation, riparian areas. Again, there were not that many on the property, but we did improve the storm drainage in the northeast corner and through the golf course. Subdivision complies with all applicable city standards. The subdivision will not result in adverse effects on adjacent properties, traffic conditions, parking, or public improvements. Again, 112th Avenue has been constructed to the standards set by the city, and the Chambers Road design, we're hoping that those plans can be approved by the end of the year. And then we can hopefully enter into a partnership agreement with the city to make that a regional improvement for the benefit of all. It's about a $20 million project that we're planning. Adequate and sufficient public safety, transportation, utility facilities and services, recreation facilities, parks and schools are available. Again, we are providing school sites on other areas of the Reunion Master Plan community. We do have a development agreement in place. We went ahead and did a site-specific development agreement for this filing, even though our consolidated development agreement had expired at the end of last year. And again, the proposed phasing for the development is rational in terms of available infrastructure capacity, going from east to west, taking advantage of the existing drainage, as well as complying with the fire district for access. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle. And of course, I'm here to answer any questions as we go through the night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So I think between our presentation and Jennifer's and the letter that we provided, I hope that you agree that we meet the approval criteria. I'm just going to bring them up here so that we can see them on the screen. As people have any comments or questions, sometimes it helps to be able to refer back to what those are. Other than that, we just thank you for your time. And again, if you have any questions, I think the next is public comment or questions for us.
Yeah,
And
we'll
then
take
public
questions
comment?
from the
Okay.
commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
A couple from me, and then we'll open it up to the other commissioners. Yeah, thank you for addressing, I think, the comments I've received from the public. That helps us, because I know those will be many questions that the commissioners would ask, of you. So taking those. Two things that I saw that weren't addressed is one, and maybe this is a city question as well, but design standards. I know there was many questions of design standards of the cluster homes versus other products that Oakwood is offering. So how does that relate into this approval process?
So I think as Jennifer has mentioned previously, the actual home design standards are not part of the approval process. The things that are the height and the setback, minimum and maximum square footage and so forth. So what it looks like isn't part of the approval criteria, but kind of the size and how it's situated on the lot is.
Okay. So the design standards, how would we answer that to the public then? Steve, or is that part of a previous PUD that dictated wood siding versus vinyl siding and this type of roof and those type of things?
Most of those standards are found in the Land Development Code. As mentioned, the actual home models will go through our master model review process, the same as other subdivisions right in the northern range of that size. And so there's specific standards in the LDC for developments over 8 acres, which this would fall into. That's where we review things like architecture, articulation, those things. So those are reviewed separately, and that is an administrative approval.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure that's. Mr. Yost, did you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. So there's a standard in the PUD for an acre and how many homes that acre can have. How many homes can be in that 1 acre? Is that correct?
There are density regulations, if that's what you're
exactly
referring
right.
to.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Does Oakwood fall below those density regulations?
They are within the standards outlined for that particular piece of property.
Are they okay?
So that standard, let me just turn to that page so I'm not relying on my memory.
There's a table in there, Mr. Yost, I think.
So the
showing
allowances are 6 to 24 dwelling units per acre,
Okay.
and they fall at about 7. There's a couple ways to calculate density. Either way, they fall within the range.
So they're on the lower end of that.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Questions from the commissioners?
I have a question. Going back to not necessarily the standards, but the design of the home and that process, just reading through the comments from the public, is that process another opportunity for the public to provide feedback, or are those closed door decisions?
Those standards are already outlined in the Land Development Code. So those standards are public information. Those same standards are applied to all of our developments unless there's something specific in a different PUD. But for the most part, those design, they're not design guidelines, but those design standards, right? Like in terms of architecture, we have anti-monotony requirements, right, for spacing and things like that. So those standards are available, they're outlined, but that is not a public process. You all would have to meet many, many, many times to approve all the homes, right, that come through that master model process.
But the land development code changes will come through the commission.
Oh, of course,
typically.
changes to the LDC,
Yeah,
yes.
so they'll
Okay.
come through the commission.
One of my questions. I think I was just wondering, just reading through the comments, there's quite a few comments about there being sort of 3-story homes, for instance. And I was wondering, given that that's not part of these criterions, where would the public have an opportunity to voice those concerns if they don't have a direct impact on this conversation? And maybe there's not a space for that.
Jennifer, if I could just jump in here, the height is one of the standards. So there's a maximum height of 35 feet. That's in the PUD.
Mhm.
And we're
Below that.
lower than that. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. One thing that I didn't hear addressed, I would have brought up, is traffic concern west of Chambers on 100 and the impacts of this subdivision on that stretch. I know that that's in process of being wasn't really outlined in your presentation. I'm just worried about the connection from this to other amenities in the area, such as the center.
So I'm sorry, did you say west?
West of Chambers
On
on 112. The current-
112th. I'm sorry, I
Yes.
misheard you. I thought you said.
Because there's a lot of
120th.
conversation of how Chambers is being impacted. But
So-
we didn't really hear about west of Chambers. And I know that's in process and the detention and all that work has been going on.
Right.
Is currently going on. I was just curious of the impacts.
So I'll give a general answer and then I'll turn it over to Jim. When a traffic impact study is required for development, the traffic engineer has to look at all existing traffic as well as anticipated future traffic, both now as well as at certain intervals in the future. And so I don't know specifically to what extent the traffic for the development west of Chambers was taken into consideration for this particular plat, but it will be taken into consideration for those future plats that you may or may not get an opportunity to review. So I'm going to have Jim jump in here and talk.
Yeah, I think I
I
know exactly what I mean. It's a dirt road now that people take that shouldn't be taking.
Yes,
Right,
and
but I think
I traveled
again,
it
maybe
today and
staff can
it was
chime
a
into that,
very
right? That is-
interesting.
That is
I was just-
probably of a future, I don't know where the funds are or where that development is. Maybe Steve or staff knows where that is at, but eventually that might get paved.
I can talk a little bit more specific. So the Second Creek Regional Detention Pond that you see on this drawing here, there's a kind of a 4 or 5 step process that we're going through. We have actually started some of that pond design work with the Army Corps of Engineers. The city's actually the applicant, but the Reunion Metro District is doing the lead design work on it. It's very complicated to get essentially storm flows over that ditch that's on the north side of the road while getting making sure we're not impacting the ditch. So I think the city has also looked at how we can do some stream channel improvements north of 112th, which would be an entirely city project. This is the kind of thing that we would be looking at in our hopefully amended and restated consolidated development agreement, that we can work with the city to design those drainage improvements. All of that, plus the road that you see there in kind of the aqua color, is about a $20 million project for the drainage and the road. I know the city, unfortunately, we didn't get the GID passed in November. So I know the city does not have it in its CIP at this point. I defer to Brent on timing on it. But one of the things we are doing, if you notice there where it says Second Creek, kind of east of there, but west of Chambers, that kind of wedge shaped property, that's actually filing 39 and 40. And so we will actually be constructing a section of 112th west of Chambers, at least to the kind of edge of the floodplain, to make sure that we're serving filing 39 and 40. But to get that road all the way to Bison Ridge is a much larger regional project we're going to have to partner with the city on.
Thank you.
Mr. Douglas. Thank you. Being prior to being on city council from 2011, 2019, and part of the 5 projects in 5 years with the built out of Bison Ridge Rec Center, 112th was both being built at the same time. And it wasn't, but there was drawings and actual specs to show the flow and a box culverts and everything. And then in 2017, when Jay came in, kind of put that on halt based on their relationship and in interaction. And I know that I have several questions, but one is, okay, this is a Fifth Amendment. So what was amendment filing 1, 2, 3, and 4? What did those look like? What was the initial filing for Shea Holmes's area? Because I know at the time Shea had plans to build this corner out. And I think it was like, they were gonna do like a gated community 55 and up or so on this parcel. So when you say amended 5, there was 4 previous filings, correct?
So there's been 5 amendments to the Reunion PUD. Again, the Reunion PUD was initially over 3,000 acres. So amendments 2, 3, and 4 are for very specific smaller areas. They didn't pertain to this particular corner. And amendment number 1, which is sort of the, not the original, but the back to 2002 original, did call out the exact same uses at this corner. So Village 8, which is on the west side of Chambers Road, is actually that active adult, which I'm sure Jim Hayes could talk lots about. We've had many conversations about that. But that is a future development. But this particular corner has actually always been mixed use with the allowances that are the same today in the Fifth Amendment.
Okay.
Does that help answer that question?
And if I could just jump in here, Jennifer, as part of that Fifth Amendment to the PUD, Oakwood did analyze each of the areas that were undeveloped to see if the existing PUD still fit the needs of the community. And, given the changing economic conditions and the desire for a variety of housing stock that could serve, more attainable housing needs and so forth. And this particular area was determined by staff and Oakwood to still consistently be a high-density residential area.
The comp plan has always shown it as high density.
That's correct.
residential. The PUD was mixed use until a certain time.
I'm sorry. So yes, the comp plan has always future land use map, say that past twice. Has always called this corner out as high-density residential.
Correct.
The PUD does actually allow residential, which could be called high-density. It's this cluster home sort of arrangement. So some people call that high-density when they're referring to the PUD. But and Jennifer did a great job. The comp plan and the future land use map is the vision. And then the PUD is the property rights of the owner. How can it be? And those rights were developed in concert with the city looking at the comp plan. Did you have another question?
Oh, yeah, I have
Commissioner
plenty of
Douglas?
questions there. The other thing, it says on criteria H, a development agreement between the city and the applicant has been executed, which was the consolidated agreement, which expired last year.
That's correct.
Okay, so based on that, that's one criteria that should not be considered here because that's no longer part of the agreement. So going forward into 2022,
we have a brand new development agreement. We have a standalone development agreement just for this filing 38 plat. The consolidated development agreement did expire at the end of 2021. As Jim mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities for partnering in there with the city. The city wasn't prepared to go forward with an extension of that. So we actually had to go through the process, which is what really was one of the causes of tonight's special hearing. We had to go through the process of negotiating a standalone development agreement for this particular filing, which has been negotiated. It's been approved by both parties. And I believe it's been signed, at least by Oakwood. I don't know if it's been signed by the city or not.
That's correct. It's been signed by Oakwood. The city would approve it following approval of the plat.
Very good. But it's
included in the
form. It's approved as to form.
That is correct. It's been agreed to by the city's attorney's office, our public works staff, and the community development director.
Okay, thank you.
so there's a new consolidated agreement's been approved?
It's not a consolidated agreement. It's a new development agreement specifically for this filing.
Okay, and that's already been before council?
It's not required to go before council. Individual development agreements are an administrative process. Only consolidated development agreements are required to go before council because a consolidated development agreement generally has more requirements of the developer and more incentives or concessions of the city in furtherance of something larger like the reunion parcel. So
Yes, and I know, I understand that. Just that Mr. Hayes had referred it to the prior development. And this states the same too as the development agreement between the city, and he was saying prior. So we have to be careful what words we use because it said prior. So that's what I'm referring to, was the consolidated agreement, not the new agreement. Mr. Hayes said prior. And then.
So just to clarify, this parcel was subject to the prior consolidated development agreement. It's now subject to a standalone development agreement.
Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying that. Now I'm looking here at reunion filing 38 illustration site plan. Would you mind going to that map?
Do I? Is it on my presentation?
Yes, on your, I'm sorry, your presentation.
This one?
Nope, keep going back.
This one?
Keep going. This one, right.
Okay.
Now, the traffic here, I know when you go northbound, because of the construction that was prior, pre-done, the developers, when you head north from 112th and Chambers, it starts 2 lanes there. So is this gonna be 2 lanes, 4 lanes all the way down from 112th to 104, I'm sorry, from 112th to 104th, is it gonna be 4 lanes?
My understanding, and Jim could speak about this better, but my understanding is that the current design is for a 4-lane road with, as I said, sidewalks on either side. And I believe his map shows here in the pink, 106th to 112th is this project that's in the design phase. And then that will require an agreement with the city for some funding to come from the city for their portion of the construction. But we're in the second round of design review comments for that improvement.
Okay. Mr. Hayes, can you answer that question? It's gonna be 4 lanes?
Yeah, I believe it's a minor arterial. So that would be 4 lanes, and it would also have sidewalks, et cetera, with it.
Okay. No way am I saying that don't have the right to build residence here. I look at just across the street, the Greens, and that's high density as well. And it's totally different when it comes to high density. That's high density, and this is labeled high density as well. And so I go to Criterion E with, I'm sorry. The subdivision is consistent with approval of rezoning, comp plan, and PUD zone document. So I look at that for example. And so with the intent to, I say would mirror that, but this is more, the layout is extreme. This is a lot. And you can have high density, but these lots don't have enough adequate space.
I'm sorry, did you have a question about the
Well,
density?
Yes, it's the lots are not designed very well for this subdivision.
So with all due respect, the density of this proposal meets the PUD document. In fact, we're on the low end of the per acre density. If you look at potential uses, you could have up to 40 dwelling units per acre here, which, 40 times 20 is, help me, 4 times 2 is 8 plus 2 zeros, 800. 800 apartments or condominiums. And so, you know, Oakwood Homes looks at what the needs are of the community and how those needs can be met through the PUD zone document and in compliance with the zone district for the particular property. And it's their determination that this is the needed type of use for this property and that it is compliant with both of those documents as well as the other criteria, regardless of what the use is on the other side of 112th or even the Adams County parcel on the northeast corner. So
Right. Well, then you have criteria D, the general layout of lots, roads, driveways. I understand about the improvements on Chambers, but as far as the lots and driveways, the way it's laid out, there are some concerns because within the neighborhoods, it may look right for people to go inside their driveway, inside the garage, but that's not happening.
So there's actually, and we don't have our parking plan, I think, but by using the cluster home sort of lot design, we actually provide fewer curb cuts for driveways. So each individual house doesn't have their own curb cut in their own driveway, which allows us to have other parking spaces on street for guests. Understand the city has regulations regarding on-street parking. There's also, for some of the lots, they have, all of the lots have 2-car garages. And some of the lots have an extra parking space that's part of this common driveway. And then there's CC&Rs that for this development that delineate obligations such as snow removal and so forth. So there's, you know, we've provided to eliminate any of those sorts of conflicts between neighbors that you're talking about. And as I said, it does meet all of the transportation, public works requirements regarding driveways and the roads interior to the development.
Okay. And then you have F, the subdivision. Will, it says here, is about substantial or undue adverse effect on adjacent properties. And this, we're talking a golf course. We're talking that you draw back at a 3,000 foot level and you look at the landscape and how this subdivision fits at the end of a golf course. That'd be different if the golf course was several acres away, but it's right up against hole 17.
So I'm sorry, again, I'm trying to find a question in there.
Well, I'm just telling you, hold on. I'm just telling you about the criteria.
I think you're making a statement about how you.
I'm just telling you about this criteria, about the subdivision.
Right.
About having, here it says undue effects, and it has extreme effects on the adjacent properties around it.
So I would ask you to narrow your question as to what particular effect that it's having that is part of the review criteria, because views, as we've discussed, is not a criteria.
I didn't say views.
So what is the criteria that is being adversely affected?
Well, it's an extreme amount of lots. The way the lots are designed, they're just crammed in there. And I'm thinking about the Marshall Fire for one thing. Hold on. Now, please don't interrupt.
So point of order, I'd like to make sure that we're having questions asked as opposed to testimony at this point. I think that's fine. I think that the board will have an opportunity to speak among themselves. So if we could have questions, I would appreciate that.
Sure. How would you address this subdivision to what we've seen in Marshall? How would you counteract that as far as safety mitigations?
So this subdivision has been referred to the South Adams County Fire District for their review as to any sort of hazards associated with this property and this density, and they've determined that there are no concerns.
That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions from the commissioners?
One additional, just in terms of the cluster lots,
Yes.
just looking at the requirements for a mixed use, what constitutes the lot?
A lot frontage. I'm going to
So
have to
there's-
defer.
That would
I'm
probably
gonna
go to
have
the design
defer-
standards, Mr. Bitlaw.
Because there's a
Yeah.
60 foot
The easement.
lot
and-
frontage, so how is that? Or am I looking at wrong?
My recollection is that there's not a lot frontage requirement in the reunion PUD for these
Okay.
lots.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that I have a good understanding of this. One of the things that I try to be really mindful of in these conversations is when there are, and there is a question here, but when there are opportunities for us to develop multi-use versus residential, given sort of the saturation that there exists right now in Reunion, given some of the other things that have been discussed. But my understanding of this space, and I just want to make sure that this is the case, that it is high density residential use, and that's how it's always been. Is
In the
that-
comp plan, that's what
in the
I
comp
wanted
plan.
to make sure that everybody
just wanted to
understood that the
make sure
comp
that's-
plan has always had this as high density residential.
Great, that's just what I needed to know. Thank you so much.
Okay,
I have-
thank you. Oh, and
I
then-
have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah. Is the reason you're crowding everything? And I'm not saying you're crowding, let's see, how do I put this? Is the reason you're using smaller spaces for homes to make, is that reason partly due to the fact that you want to make homes more affordable?
So I think that the city attorney was about to call a point of order. I'll defer to
And-
her.
And
I
Commissioner,
I
just-
withdraw
just
my
again, I
question.
know I sound like a
Yeah,
broken
I
record
got- I
here,
withdraw my
but just to focus back on the criteria, specifically issues like the design and development plan are not part of the criteria. And
Got it.
I think we've clarified the densities have met, we've
Yeah,
we've
you-
heard that similar
we did,
question.
we
We've
did.
clarified what the densities are.
Here's, am I allowed to comment?
Well, if you have a question, let's ask.
I don't
let's ask
have any
questions
other
for the applicant.
questions. No, I don't.
Okay.
Let's continue to move.
I would like to reserve the opportunity to come back and answer any other questions you have after public comment, if that public comment brings forth some further questions.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
We will now move over to our public comment portion of the meeting. Again, we ask folks to please step to the podium. We ask you to please state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Any questions should be referred to me. Thank you.
Breathe better.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brenda Bergeron. I live at 15501 East 112th Avenue. I'm in the Greens. I moved here in 2007. I lived till last April in Reunion, so I'm well aware of the, the different things that have been passed for densities and whatever. But I think that, since 2007, if you look at how much has been built and you look at 104th and all the multifamily homes, apartment things that are going up there, the new Reunion Ridge, and we aren't saying maybe it's time to step back and say, maybe we need to slow down some of the building. Let's get Chambers widened so that it can accommodate 153 home or cars coming out every day from that neighborhood. Let's get some schools. Look at the schools. You can't tell me that 27J might have approved and said, oh yeah, we're fine. But the new South Lawn Elementary is already considered full. Turnberry's full, the Reunion Elementary's full, and now you have 153 homes that are going to be approved to go up, that are going to have kids going out. Where are they going to go? The in lieu thing of giving money instead of putting aside land for homes is all fine, but it doesn't get a kid in school. And you can't tell me that 153 cars minimum coming out of that neighborhood every day onto 112th and Chambers isn't going to cause major traffic issues. We already notice on 112th how many more cars there are since Reunion has built, like in the golf course, you know, in the last area around the golf course. There are so many more cars just from that. And now you're going to have an area of things spilling out onto 112th and spilling out onto Chambers. It just doesn't make sense to keep letting them build and build and build without. It's nice that they want to get together and have an agreement so that they work with the city or the county, whatever the city, to improve things, widen Chambers, build more schools. We don't have enough grocery stores to accommodate another 153 homes, you know, and all the people, they're having a hard time keeping things stocked in the store as it is now. I think it's just time. I think what people want is, I mean, I could say that they're ugly, they're ugly, and the ones that are near Walden, there are cars parked all over the street. People that are visitors or people that have extra cars that live in those because they have the shared driveway. So it's not as simple as putting up drawings on here. I think you need to listen to what people are saying. You know, I think that they need to look, the Planning Commission needs to look at the long-term effects. You know, and these homes are not being built to be more affordable. They're just being built to build homes, you know, and cover the land. So anyway.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's my 3 minutes.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and address. Thank you.
Also sorry about all of this. I had foot surgery on
You're okay.
January 11th and wasn't really planning to be here. My name is Georgianne Becker. I reside at 16111 Fairway Drive in that part of the development area that is described as the Vic Gallery at Reunion HOA area. My husband, Eric Stowe, and myself have been owners for 3 years, having spent 40 years in the Southeast Metro Denver area and moving up to this area to be closer to our grandchildren, who are also constituents of 27J and Commerce City. We made that decision. So thank you for having this public hearing, but I do have to tell you that I'm not in the area of interested persons, apparently, because our home is not located in the 300 foot level. So we didn't get notice except through some of our other neighbors who did get notice. I sent in some extensive written comments and appreciate I only have 3 minutes here. I focused on the traffic problems, and I agree with the previous speaker that perhaps we should not be putting in anything on that corner until the traffic problems on Chambers are addressed. I thought it was interesting in listening to the comments of Mr. Hayes that there is a plan to have a light at Heartland. But the current conditions at Heartland, without regard to 112th, and a lot of Reunion goes out onto Heartland, and it dead ends there at Chambers, but it's practically impossible sometimes of the day to make a left and sometimes impossible to make a right because you can't see beyond the big trucks that are trying to make a left. So I took a particular focus on the traffic study that was in the materials. And I think the traffic study was woefully too narrowly focused, inadequate, and significantly out of date. And these are the reasons. It only evaluates the impact of this proposal at that one intersection. It doesn't evaluate the intersection of Heartland. It doesn't evaluate the intersection at 104th or at 120th off of Chambers. It's also inadequate because it did the traffic study in October of 2021. And we all know that there are huge amounts of housing being built right now that are going to come off onto 112th, but they would not have been evaluated in the October 2021 traffic study. And then the additional reason it's inadequate is because it uses assumptions and projections that come out of a traffic study that was done in May of 2000, 22 years ago. And so I know I'm probably running out of time, but I wanted to emphasize walkability, safety, and I doubt in the context of the recent terrible Marshall fire that people up there have really got an appropriate read from South Adams Fire Protection District on wildfire mitigation in that area. We know we are living with very high wind conditions, dry conditions, and quite honestly, I can't believe that it wasn't evaluated in the materials that I at least had the ability to look at. So in summary, before this PUD is approved, with or without modifications, please reevaluate the whole Chambers golf course area's density. This is not an area. It's not the same area it was 22 years ago. There's still high winds, tumbleweeds, moles, and prairie dogs. However, now there are lots of real people living up there 22 years later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll just ask staff a couple of things. One, South Adams County Fire was part of the review process.
That's correct, they were.
And can you expand on, as part of the traffic study, what is the radius typically that we ask the developer to provide?
I would not be the best staff person to answer that, but we do have the city's engineer here, who I believe would be much better equipped to answer those questions.
Yeah, good evening, Commission. My name is Brent Soderlund. I'm the city engineer for Commerce City. So I just wanted to add, so the traffic study, let me read here. The background traffic study, or the background traffic that it looked at was for the horizon years 2023 and 2040. It included Reunion Parcels 7B, 7E, Reunion Village 8 Falling 1, Reunion Parcel 8A, the remaining findings of Village 8 and Reunion Center for the background traffic. So it did include the background traffic in the report.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I guess I did want to address the Chambers and Heartland was not included in the study because in a previous study, we knew that it was going to be warranted when we did the widening of Chambers Road.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment from those present? Yes, sir. Please name and address.
Yeah, my name is Philip Baca. I live at 15441 Fairway Drive. I've lived there for 14 years.
Thank you.
I purchased that property for a reason. And one of the things I don't appreciate tonight was the flippant attitude that Oakwood Homes and their council took, that this is doesn't affect anybody. That's bullet number 6. I'd like to point out to you, says has no adverse effect on surrounding properties. Well, it certainly has an adverse effect on my property. I don't know that you're my, Mr. Hayes, you're not my neighbor. Michelle, you're not my neighbor. Nobody is my neighbor from Oakwood Homes. And I've tried to deal with Oakwood Homes for a number of years as the president of our HOA, and never had an appropriate response to any questions I ever had with them. But this certainly affects my property. Affects the value of my property. I've probably invested over $150,000 since I've lived there, and I intend to stay there for a while. But when you build a subdivision like this, certainly they meet all the minimum standards. I want everybody to hear that because they say they meet all the minimum standards, right, Jennifer, of the code. Well, just because you can meet the minimum standards, does that mean you should build that type of a community? It adversely affects us. It'll take away our view. And certainly council told me that we have no right to a view, okay, under the law. Well, why do we buy our homes? We buy most of our homes with a view, and we expect to maintain that view over the course of ownership. Just because they're below the 35-foot height level on their homes doesn't mean it's the appropriate thing to build at that point in time. I would like to see the written comments from the fire department. I would like to see their comments, and I would like to see their findings, because I don't think they exist. And I would like to see the comments and the findings from the police department, because I don't think there are written findings. They may have looked at it, but I want to know if they really did a study. Did they really pay attention and look at the details? Okay, because if they didn't, I think that's a malfeasance, or at least non-feasance. I think there's a real risk of public safety there, not only for excessive amount of police calls with the population density there, but there certainly is a wildfire mitigation risk. And I would just like to see those. I know that, you know, they meet all the minimums. There's no doubt about that. But they're certainly not meeting the needs of the neighbors, and they're certainly adversely affecting the value of my property. Now I'm at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Thank you. Anyone else from? Thank you, ma'am. Please, your name and address.
My name is Rachel Ng. I live at 15461 Fairway Drive. I'm Phil's next door neighbor. And I had lots of notes written out, but I think I'm going to take a different direction. I thought it was really nice of Michelle to note that this was really fun for her. It's not fun for me. It's like, it's not a game. Like, where you're sitting from me, that's how far away, I mean, double that, that's how far these are from my house. Like Phil said, I bought a house in Reunion because I love Reunion, and we've lived here for almost 13 years. We built our business here. We've raised our children here. I plan to live to 104. I've always said that, which means I'll be living in this house for a really long time. Oakwood Homes, someone asked, why did you put them so close together? It's because they want to make more money, right? I mean, the more homes you build, the more homes you sell. They want to meet the demands of the public. My home on the golf course, let me tell you, it cost a pretty penny. Those homes are not going to be affordable. Golf course homes are not affordable for most people. So it's a moot point. That's absurd. So I guess the criteria that I want to focus on is criteria F1. And it says the subdivision will not result in a substantial or undue adverse effect on adjacent properties. I am the adjacent property. I also did not receive notifications. I didn't receive any notifications. So when they say that there's not an adverse effect, there is. It's an adverse effect not only on me, not only on Phil, it's on the whole neighborhood. When you drive into Reunion, the golf course is typically, you know, it's like the center of the community. You want to like showcase that. That should have your most beautiful homes that people say, man, I got to move to this neighborhood. We're going to stick, I can't remember the exact number, 150 something homes crammed as close together as you can possibly get, meeting bare minimum standards. It doesn't make any sense. The other criteria is F2, where it says any adverse effect has been or will be mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. Not minimum, the maximum. Building really tall, close together homes is going to diminish the value of my home significantly. So I ask that you prioritize people over profit. I ask that you prioritize the people who are currently living in the community over a corporation. Because I'm a real person. And I live there. And when Oakwood leaves, that's what I look at for the rest of my life. Whatever you guys approve, that's what I look at for the rest of my life, every single day. It's not a joke to me. It's not fun. There are lots of options for high density that can earn them a crap ton of money, so they win, but it also leaves the community in a way that is beautiful and where it does not adversely affect the neighbors. So when you vote, I want you to remember that you're voting for people. You're voting for me. I realize there's going to be building there. I'm asking that it's reasonable building, not whatever this Mod Podge of homes is that they've put together. So I just ask that you vote for me.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone further from public here with us today? We'll now close that portion. We will move over to our virtual for those members online. Tricia, do you want to bring those forth? I want to go first with Mr. Kamick. Mr. Kamick, can you hear us?
I can, and no, I have no comment. I'm sorry.
Ms. Gudmundson, next.
She's no longer on the line.
She's no longer on the line. Ms. Sanchez?
You should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Oh, he's gonna ask him.
No longer on the line.
There are no other public members on the line anymore.
We now close our public comment portion of the meeting.
Just Chairman, just another point of order. The procedures do allow for rebuttal from the applicant. A few. So does it.
I think we'll allow the applicant to address those words. And
Thank you. So I think I'll address the last speaker first. I think we all have our professions that are fun for us, but it doesn't mean that some of the processes that we go through are fun. But I will say that we are here tonight because the public demanded that we're here tonight. And we showed up to answer all the public's questions. And we will continue to do that if that's what is required of us, whether it's fun or not. And I will also say that I plotted out every single written commenter and how close they were. And with all due respect, the last speaker is not within 300 feet. So, but we did comply with all of our notice obligations. In terms of the other commenters, I think it was, primarily a recitation of some of the other things that we had discussed. I think that the city engineer adequately addressed the traffic concerns, and I think with that, we'll conclude our presentation. Again, asking you to agree with staff and Oakwood that we did meet all 9 of these criteria and that you will recommend approval by City Council. So thank you for your time.
thank you.
Is there a chance for any rebuttal?
No, sir, our public comment portion is closed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We'll now move for a motion for the case and then discussion from the commissioners. We have a motion for the case.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the planning committee enter a finding that the requested final plot for Union Filing 38 located at the southeast corner of East 112th Avenue and Chambers Road, known as case S 776-2022, meet the criteria of the Land Development Code and based on upon such findings, recommend that the city council approve the final plot subject to no, I'm sorry. That's for recommendations. I'm sorry, my bad. So I move that the planning commission enter a finding that the requested final plot for reunion filing 38 located at the southeast corner of East 112th Avenue and Chamber Road, known as case S776-2022, meet their criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such finding, recommend that the city council approve the final plot.
I have a motion. Do I have a second for the case? I have a motion and a second. Discussions amongst the commissioners.
Yeah, I understand the community's concerns. I completely do. And I also understand that what we told the builders and the developers that come in here is that, okay, you have to do this, and then we set a rule book up. And we said that was going to be called the Land Development Code. Now, this Oakwood Homes has met all those requirements. It's not necessarily what the community likes or the community wants. I mean, listening to this, I think, well, maybe we should change the Plan Development Code. But Oakwood met the criteria. They met the rules. And so for me to say, no, I know you met the rules, but we're going to deny you the request anyway, would seem unfair to Oakwood. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Van Dyke?
I think my concern is about pace. And I feel like there are things that are happening around this area that need to happen first before this space is developed. So I agree with what you're saying, Commissioner Yost, that I do think that this area is going to be developed, and it's going to be developed with high density housing. That was one of my questions, because I think, again, my concern in terms of how we're growing in this area is that we have developers that are choosing not to develop multi-use space when they have an opportunity to do so. It doesn't sound like that's the case with this area. But even so, I think there is a question around urgency and pace that I'm grappling with.
Thank you. You know, as far as meeting the minimum requirements, I don't think they have not met the minimum requirements. I look at D, the general layout of the lots, roads, driveways. I mean, they have utilities on here, drainage facilities, other services. And it just, I'm sorry, the general lot layout is not right for this area. I'm not saying that the high density can't be built here. It's just the way it's laid out that is. Like I said last week in planning, when we had our study session, we had to be sensible and have a conscious of what our city would look like 20 years from now. And, you know, I look at Denver, in certain areas they call it the Green Mile, but it's marijuana facilities along those corridors. And here we talk about residential, that we need rooftops. We have plenty of rooftops. We have way too much rooftops. And right now, and since there's no consolidated agreement, I did ask about this before, about development, there's supposed to be ancillary along to complement the residential that's built. And that has not worked itself today. Okay. So that's criteria D, and criteria F the subdivision were a result of extreme adverse effect with the neighbors around because of what they have to go through to get in and out of their areas. Because it's like, think about chicken or the egg, what came first, okay? Or what was first? And so, yes, yes, in mind, there is a road plan for the future. But I know, being in prior position, it took 25 years for Pinion on-ramp to be developed. And not saying this is going to take 25 years, but we have to think of putting ourselves in the position when it comes to planning. Let's plan the plan, not do something after the fact. And like I said, I'm not saying that they can't build. It's just that I think this here needs to go back and be reconsidered to make sure there is proper layout for that area being high dense. It could look so much better. And so I say criteria D has not been met and criteria F. So I will be voting no on this.
Any further comments, Mr. Pillow?
I'm in alignment with Commissioner Yost. I feel that this development, the criteria that was set out in the comprehensive in the PUD, in the presentation, we heard that they could make this way more dense than they're allotted. If they chose, they could have 50-foot buildings in the zone. In mixed use. So I believe that they've taken into the considerations and it's working within the constraints for the plan and in their PUD.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I would like to say that, you know, as a commission, and we've heard lots of questions on traffic studies in schools and the fire department. We do rely heavily on, you know, their expertise of reviewing those documents and providing our commission feedback. So if 27J has reviewed this applicant, we do believe, you know, to address the comments, right? If the fire department or the police department are those key divisions, right, that they have done their due diligence to provide our commission with the information that we need to make an appropriate decision, you know, whether that's this case or the previous case or any other case, right? So we do take that for heart and we do feel like that is staff's role is to communicate those things to that. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody, you know, understood that. So with that, why don't we call for a vote? The motion has passed, 3 yeses, 2 noes. So in this case, we'll move forward with that recommendation to City Council. Do we know when that's Steve? Do we know when this case is moving forward to City Council?
We do. It will be on,
I believe it's March 7th.
Monday, March 7th. So there'll be another public hearing on that particular time and date. The final decision.
Moving forward with the agenda for moving over, that concludes our cases for the evening. Any commission business that we need to discuss underneath any commissioners? Any legal business, Ms. Fair?
Nothing from legal, thank you.
Steve, any staff business that we need to discuss tonight?
Just the only notice that our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 1st. We will have a meeting that night.
With that, there's no further comments from the commissioners. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.